Open source has changed the world, and it's changed the world greatly for the better. It's a movement that's been going on for quite a while now, and it didn't start because of a government or a company or a politician. It started really from people who wanted to change the way people had access to software, because software is so important to all our lives now. Whether you know it or not, you are using open source software right now, and you're probably using it every moment of your life. And that's due to a very dedicated group of people who started and who grew this movement over many years. Because this is such an important change in our world, and because it happened in the way it did, I thought it was important to capture the personal stories of people involved in this movement. What made them so dedicated? What made them understand that this was so important?
You know, I'm not sure that we ever, or certainly I never made an initial decision that, oh, I want to build an open source audio editor and distribute it in the world, and it'll become the most popular.
Millions of copies, and
yeah, it'll be the primary editor of its kind in the world. That just never crossed our minds. Even, you know, at that time, which was around 2000, you know, most people in the world didn't have the kinds of computers or the kinds of network connections and everything else that you would need to even distribute something like this. It grew out of some very personal goals and needs in a lab, and it just kind of happened to be useful for some other things and make its way gradually out into the world and develop into what it is now.
There were a couple of terminals left in the room that nobody was using because they were meant for you know, the organizers of the place. You had to log in, and of course I didn't have a password. But somehow a few friends of mine managed to hack into the computers and into these terminals, and got noticed, well, or caught. I don't know but they were nice enough to say, oh, you seem to be, you know, doing pretty well with these things. So why don't we open up an account for you? There was one guy that I met there who had a long beard and long hair, and whose name is Richard M. Stallman. So I met this guy who was just, you know, an ordinary guy, more hairy than most, but still.
Well, I guess one of the first itch I needed to scratch was that I was spending all of my time on Linux because as grad students, we all got a Linux system on our desk to do our computer science homework and to develop software. But all of the audio software we had only ran on Windows or Mac. And so there wasn't really anything that I could use just to do even basic manipulation to do this research. And so it's really good that I was naive, because I just thought, oh, well, I'll just build a little audio editor. How hard could it be? You know, if I'd known that, you know, it would consume the next 10 plus years of my life, maybe I wouldn't have gotten started. But
the idea of a community and bringing people in really came about after the initial work. We, you know, it was just us, and we were using the software and released the software, but then later other people sort of started using it and wanted to make improvements. And
I was a Debian project leader. I had never actually met another Debian developer, and fanned it out, and these 50 people who also did not physically know each other combined to create a working, running operating system. Also, the fact that open source let us all sort of look over each other's shoulders and help each other was very useful as well. So, all of these people who had no common employer, who hadn't met at that time, and um, who really only had their own private goals driving this. I think at that point, none of them were actually doing this for their employer. Combined to create a working operating system that, among other things, flew on the space shuttle. My original investment of a month of evenings I should have been spending with my wife um, really was tremendously expanded by the subsequent work of all of these people, which they did under the GPL license contribute, when in some cases the incentive for them would have been to keep their modifications private.
No, I don't think there was an aha moment. I think it was more that was the culture that I was in. So the culture I was surrounded with was one about sharing code and learning from others. And so it wasn't as much an aha moment as much as just that that was the environment I was in. And so it seemed like the only natural thing to do, um, to share any code that I wrote, just like everyone had shared all their code with me.
Maybe open source is really an outgrowth of the academic world, where in academia we do research, and we get the rewards are not so much money but recognition, that people want to be recognized for making contributions to whatever field they do research or writing in. And so we publish, but we don't publish and sign book deals. Well, actually, we do sign book deals, but terrible deals. Right? We're lucky. We're lucky to get anyone to publish anything.
There are very many embedded devices for the most mundane uses, aquarium temperature controllers, that all have this software in them, and webcams, all kinds of things. And so, for something that I spent a month upon, I did not ever receive financial compensation directly from it, but it has tens and hundreds of millions of users. All right, users who don't necessarily even know that it exists, but there is some pride in that. Just as an artist likes to have their paintings appreciated, a programmer likes to have lots of users and lots of things happening with their software. And today I know that a jet plane does not fly without using BusyBox, and uh, you don't. You probably don't wake up and get into your day without using BusyBox, and so that's really fun, and it was worth that month of evenings. And Valerie and I are still together, even though I probably neglected her for that whole month.
But then, yeah, over time, I did start finding some other interested contributors, just people who found the project. It seemed interesting to them, and they started joining in, making contributions, and that was a lot of what made it really fun for me, because it was something that we could do whatever we wanted with it, and everyone who contributed could work on whatever they felt like. But it was still fun and collaborative, and so it was fun to bounce ideas off people, to see other people's contributions, to discuss the best way to do things, to discuss how to turn it into a larger, more successful project. Um, and that was just tons of fun. It was a very different experience than I ever had, um, either doing classwork or at a job or internship where I was building software that someone else was in charge of and they had their own vision for. This is something where it could be my vision, and anyone who wanted to contribute, they could all contribute to that vision.
So I remember at the time someone saying to me, well, Pixar is having its IPO and you have Toy Story coming out, and isn't this wonderful? And at the time, the space shuttle had just launched with Debian Linux and the Biosciences project on it. And I said, well, it's cool to have a movie in theaters and to have an IPO that's being very successful. But my hobby project is orbiting in space, and that's actually more fulfilling to me.
Back because suddenly we were not in the shadow of AOL, and suddenly we were something important, and we were a bit helpless, and that means that some people were interested in helping us. Suddenly, the French unemployment agency was asking me whether I was sending resumes, and stuff like that, or whether I was creating a company. And I was not creating a company. These are the two options basically, and then they would threaten to stop the benefits from coming. And I managed to be lucky enough to be discussing with a guy who was nice and understanding, and said, "So you're building a nonprofit?" Yes, and we're going to crush Microsoft. Yeah, sure. So I would show him emails from Mitchell Baker and from the Mozilla Foundation and stuff like that. He wouldn't speak a word of English. They translate me, so I could have
You could have said
anything, but I did not. I was so yes, we were discussing, so that we could use the Mozilla brand and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, sure, it's fine. And in the end, we ended up creating hundreds of jobs in Europe. So he was right, but at the time it was a bit far fetched to to believe me and believe that I would succeed.
Also, if you're one of these programmers who has some social issues, computing is a very comfortable environment for you, because your computer um, doesn't dislike you and not work with you because it doesn't like your face. Your program runs if it's correct, and it doesn't run until it's correct. And
Yeah.
so that was also something that was very comfortable for the kind of person who really does like to stay in their cube and code, and do their work with the world that way. Now, I sort of bridged both of those worlds. Uh, I think people know this by now. I am not neurotypical, um, and so I have some of those issues, but I'm also very, very well trained.
The open source community did allow for a lot of anonymous contributions. I mean, some people even might have used their name, but without any other identifiable information. It's hard to know where in the world someone lives or how old they are. It's really fascinating to get contributions for someone and later learn that they're a teenager, or that they're that they're a senior citizen, and that they're retired and have taken up programming after an entirely different career, or any number of things, right? They could be coming from anywhere in the world. And I always found that aspect really fascinating too. You get to know someone purely by their technical contributions, and later, if you're lucky, you might get to learn things about their personal life, or they might just remain mysterious.
there were projects that at the time people just would have been considered nuts for working on. But when you have 50 nuts who believe the same as you on the internet, you're more powerful than any startup company. And so today you can achieve incredible things. And I would encourage everyone to give that a try and see if they can do it.
Well, I hope you enjoy listening to the stories in this archive. And I hope it helps make you think about how people can change the world. Thanks so much for listening.